Now, we're going to talk Indigenous voice and hear from a Conservative Liberal who supports it. Yeah, now, I know some of you hate it when I talk about the voice, but everybody else is talking about it, so you can't expect me to shut up all the time. Otherwise, you wouldn't really be in favour of open debate and the contest of ideas, would you? First up, I was struck by this assessment last night by Michael Kroger on Paul Murray Live about how the Albanese government's Yes campaign is going so far.
This is becoming ridiculous. Albo is hoist on his own petard because he thought he'd get this thing through on the vibe and all the beautiful language that the hard left uses, the voice from the hearts, you're racist if you don't agree, it's wonderful, all the language of the left that they use to get these things through and try and convince people in the middle that there's not the revolutionary change coming. It's not all that bad. It's quite good, actually. Sure. I mean, this is absurd.
Hard to argue with that, isn't it? I mean, I support an idea that I've investigated and debated over almost a decade. I certainly don't support the way the Albanese government is handling this. I think they are jeopardising it for sure. But Yes campaigners released this new book today, Statements from the Soul, the Moral Case for an Indigenous Voice. And one of the chapters is written by Karina Okotel. She's a former federal vice president of the Liberal Party, a Conservative Liberal who was a leading opponent of same-sex marriage, for instance. Karina joins me in the studio now. Thanks for joining us, Karina. Why, as a Conservative, do you support an Indigenous voice enshrined in the Constitution?
Well, Chris, this is a Conservative initiative that can't be forgotten. It was John Howard who first, in 2007, put Indigenous recognition in the Constitution on the political agenda. And
but that's different from a voice. I mean, this is recognition with a voice.
For sure. And since then, it's been constitutional conservatives that have developed on that idea and come up with the idea of an advisory body, an Indigenous advisory body enshrined in the Constitution, now called a voice, but that is constitutional conservatives who developed this proposal together with Indigenous leaders, including Shadow Attorney General Julian Leeser, who is a diehard constitutional conservative.
Sure.
Absolutely.
Then what are the concerns? What are the concerns, particularly if a voice can advise executive government as well as Parliament, that there will be legal challenges, that legal activists will try to block government progress, to delay laws by going to the High Court and seeing the High Court intervene in these issues?
Well, the work around the voice has been, specifically by constitutional conservatives, as I keep saying, is to avoid that from happening. So the idea is to ensure that the Constitution is protected and that the detail is left up to the Parliament to work out so that there aren't High Court challenges to the Constitution, but that all of that is left up to the democratic process to work out. So that is the challenge for the drafters of the amendment for the Constitution, for sure. But that is what constitutional conservatives are most concerned about and what they will see being given effect to before a referendum is put.
This is the nitty-gritty, and you, like I, with the background of this thing, the whole idea of doing it this way was to have minimal change to the Constitution, because some people wanted the racial non-discrimination clause in the Constitution, so we won't get bogged down in the detail. But the point is that, yes, you don't want to have constitutional consequences, unintended consequences. Why hasn't Anthony Albanese and the government been able to be so definitive with their wording, with their advice, with their proposals here? There seems to be all sorts of contradictory messages coming from all over the shop.
Yes, well, I mean, that is a question that I wish someone would put to Anthony Albanese. I agree with you. I think he's doing a very poor job of educating the public on what the voice is. 80% of Indigenous people support a voice. That is being forgotten. The moral imperative to see a voice passed is being forgotten, and now we're getting caught up with the argy-bargy, the bickering on both sides.
Well, this is the point I want to take up with you, is the moral imperative. This book that you've contributed to talks about the moral case for a voice. I get very, very suspicious when people talk about moral cases in politics. Let's have a look at your chapter here. Let me just bring up the title page of your chapter and a quote from it. Giving voice to the voiceless honours God. And you say here, as the prophet Isaiah said, learn to do right, seek justice, defend the oppressed, take up the cause of the fatherless, plead the case of the widow. It is this voicelessness that a First Nations voice seeks to address. Now, that's fine, Woods, but you're using a Christian context then to say to people this is the right thing to do.
Well, I support The Voice because I'm a Christian, because I'm a conservative, and because I'm a liberal. My God, as a Christian, commands me to be a voice for the voiceless. And until Indigenous people do have a voice into their own affairs, not a veto, just a voice.
Just a voice.
Just a voice.
You know me, I agree with that, but I'm very concerned, and I know a lot of our listeners, our viewers will be, that when you make this moral argument, as Michael Kroger was pointing out, once you start doing that, it's like you're lecturing people and you're telling people if they disagree with you, they are bad people or morally inferior. Surely that's not the case. There are many people who disagree with the voice being enshrined in the Constitution for very, very good reasons, and they are still just as good-hearted towards Aboriginal people and getting rid of disadvantage.
Look, I hope all of our laws, all of our constitutional reforms and our very constitution itself are all based on a moral framework. I don't understand the idea that only the voice shouldn't have moral arguments. Of course we have to look at the morality underpinning all of our laws and assess our laws, our constitution, against a moral framework. You have leading moral authorities within the church, but not just the Christian church. Statements from the soul, there are contributions from conservatives from within the Muslim tradition, Jewish tradition, Sikh, Hindus, but there is, for example, from the Catholic Church, Archbishop Peter Comensoli, who was the leading voice from the church opposing Daniel Andrews' conversion therapy legislation. Kanishka Raphael.
Well, plenty there in the book, and we'll give it a plug. And thanks for joining us, Karina. Really good to catch up with you.